Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Zero Code. My guest today is Duke Fu, an incredible, talented entrepreneur and CEO who has made a name for himself in the world of technology. Duke is the CEO and founder of Fungies.io, a company that helps game developers set up their own storefronts or marketplaces that are also embeddable in-game. And of course, it's powered by Web3 and NFTs. Duke and I met through the CV Labs, part of the CVVC Accelerator program. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Duke has an impressive track record when it comes to building and exiting companies. He started his entrepreneurial journey with MyBase.com, an online marketplace for up-and-coming brands that generated more than 3,000 unique sellers. He then went on to sell his software development company, Risen, which had a team of 40 employees working with Python, React, to NetGuru. Duke's passion for innovation did not stop there. He founded iMashup, a 3D collaboration tool for game studios, and has held different roles in international companies such as PwC and American Express. He was also the chief commercial officer at Pragmatic Coders, a blockchain DeFi development company. Duke is a true visionary in the tech industry, and I'm very excited to have him on the show to talk about his journey as an entrepreneur, the future of gaming and NFTs, and much more. Please give a warm welcome to Duke.
I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs today that are building in the space, especially in Web3, are in a very peculiar situation where we went from the highest of interest into like this bear market, and trying to survive that while building something meaningful is tough.
Yeah, just get back to building. This thing will take off. It will take years, but the rewards await those are patient and hardworking and persistent and determined. So those are both, the characteristics of great investors as well as entrepreneurs.
How patterns repeat themselves over time. You look at the dot-com boom, and then of course burst, and those that survived through the burst, through the bear market, ended up coming up swinging from the other side. And I feel we're witnessing a very similar phase right now, where there is like an overhype, an inflation of valuations for a lot of startups, not only in the Web3 space. And now we're coming to that reality where if you have something valuable and if you're persistent enough, as you have exactly said, and you can keep going, you will see the value of what you're building. And it's hard to see it sometimes, to be, even for me as an entrepreneur. Like I look backwards and I'm like, no way 6 months ago I would have thought my product would be as mature as it is today. And I've had those insights. And there's no way to understand how these insights will come and how it will affect your product.
Exactly. I've been investing in ICO projects since 2018. So a little bit of background about myself. My name's Duke, and I'm the CEO and founder of Fungies. I've been building companies for the last 10 years. I have a background in data science. Every time I hear about AI, it's like, for me in the head, it's, hey, it's data science, it's data engineering and statistics. Looking at the whole this AI craze from the perspective of someone who was educated in data science, it's pretty entertaining. Anyway, background in data science, I started my first company in 2012. It was a marketplace for up-and-coming brands. We were building a product which matches the buyers and sellers in handmade design, furniture, apparel from small designers. We have 3,000 sellers, as I say, 70,000 products, and we raised our first VC financing. And I grew the team to 25 people. And along the way, I've also made Rising, which was a software agency. I grew that to 40 people, and then sold that. At the same time, I set up iMashup.com, which was a 3D collaboration tool for the game studios. And at that time, 2018, 17, I started also investing in ICO projects with a syndicate of friends. Needless to say, all those projects that I invested, they didn't survive. And so I lost tons of money, but I gained a lot of knowledge and experience, investing in crypto projects in particular. and so from that interest and that from my let's say my interest and passion in gaming, Fungis was born. And 4 years ago I joined this company called Pragmatic Coders as a chief commercial officer, and I met Wojciech, my existing CTO and co-founder, and then we thought, let's do something together, and then we quit the company, and here we are with Fungis.
So tell us a little bit about yourself then, and personally, who are you? Where are you from? Where are you based currently? And more about Duke.
Yeah, I was born in Vietnam. I grew up there up until 6 years old, until I was six, and then my the whole family moved to Poland. The reason we moved to Poland because my dad used to study in Poland, ship engineering. Well, Vietnam is still a communist country. Poland used to be a communist country, so there was this exchange of students between, brotherly nations. And my dad was chosen to study ship engineering, and so that's why he brought the whole family here at the beginning of the 90s, 91. That was my first time being in Poland. And then I got to know the language, the people, and made tons of friends. And then 4 years later, my mom said, I want to come back to Vietnam because my brother was born. She was feeling so alone here in Poland. So we decided to come back to Vietnam for another 4 years. So during that time I had this comparison between the two countries, which were growing, which were after war, after very long wars, and Vietnam didn't win the race to become a democratic country, but there were a lot of adoptions from the Chinese economy, which was centralized economy, but with a lot of, let's say, freedom in terms of how you run your business and your choices. And so I saw both nations like developing since the 90s and how it went and where they are at, and so really exciting stuff. And after 4 years in Vietnam, I came to Poland again in '98, and since then I've been here. So probably 30 years plus in Poland now. So I'm both Polish and Vietnamese, by the way.
Oh wow, amazing. So, and I'm assuming when it comes to the cuisine, then you found dumplings in both cultures.
Yeah. So I have pho and I have the spring rolls on the daily basis and rice, and then I have the dumplings, the schnitzels, the jurek soups, pierogies, so both cultures. So in terms of how I think, I'm thinking as both an Asian and a Polish, I guess.
Amazing. What a background, and what a journey as well for you and your family. And it's interesting how you ended up gravitating towards specifically gaming and the tech. So how did you get into the gaming industry? Well, what is the origin of that story?
I've been playing games since I remember. So I remember my first game was actually Doom on the PC. My family had a PC back in the 90s in Vietnam, so that's one of the first times I've actually tried any game. I'm wrong. I'm sorry. Even before that, in the 90s, we had our Super Nintendo and the Pegasus and Super Mario Bros. And Contra. I don't know if you remember all those games for Nintendo, but that was my first time playing those games. And then came Doom, the Prince of Persia on PC, and Quake. And so I've been playing a lot of games through all those years. So I understand quite well all the gaming economies and mechanics inside games. Specifically for the business purposes, my first time talking with game studios and actually getting into the game industry was 2017-18, where when I set up iMashUp.com. We made a tool to collaborate on 3D files. So that was Google Docs for 3D. So that the idea was it could be the Figma or the Zeppelin for the 3D industry, so that the game studios, they could share the 3D files with people with no software, with no 3D software, to open the 3D files directly on the web browser, and so they could comment directly on the 3D model and giving them feedbacks how those models could be structured and developed.
All right, awesome. So it was not only the mechanism of being able to view the 3D files and give comments on it, but also to extract them as well and use them in other formats. Was that also like part of the functionality?
Yeah, so the flow worked like this. So we had an import feature, so you could import into the software any file format you wanted, FBX, OBJ, most popular formats, GLTF. And then in the software itself, we had this compression algorithm which compressed the 3D models and showed them in a web browser. It's called a Babylon.js, which is a framework to show 3D files in the web browser called WebGL. And so we showed the 3D files, and then you could also export that to GLTF. So export, once you made changes, once you had made a new version, you could also download that version to your desktop. But the main feature is, yes, it allowed people to feedback and comment directly on the 3D model instead of I've seen this so many times, like people send each other screenshots, and the 3D screenshot. It was a 2D screenshot, right, with all the handwritten notes on how and what to change on the 3D model. Or what's worse was the long chain of emails from the 3D artists and designers to their clients, like explaining how it should work. So it was a tedious and long process of giving feedbacks for the 3D models, and our software was meant to shorten that time.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. So you focus on the productivity, just the user interface, the usability, made it easier for creators to build. Amazing. Yeah. And so what happened with that company? So what was the...
Yeah. At the same time, I was running Ryzen, which is a software agency. It's a service business, and businesses are extremely hard in terms of how you structure the revenue and how the bills are paid. So first of all, when your company generates 70% of revenue from one client, you are screwed. And second, the bills were paid in I guess in the whole service industry. When you invoice something, you gotta wait 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, depending on how large the client is. So we had both of the problems. So at the end of that and at the end of the journey, we had one Swiss client, and he was also late with paying the bills. Ultimately, he paid all the invoices. They paid all the invoices, but at the same time, we didn't have the credit line to allow the cash flow for our company. So it was extremely hard times. And I had also iMesh up at the same time, and the product was in development. It was nearly finished, and we got some backing as well. And so at the same time, I had this company which were struggling in terms of cash flow. So we had to sell the company, and we had to sell the team to NetGuru, which is a larger entity, just because we lost a major client of us, and so I decided to have someone else take over the team and provide them with the perfect working environment. So I was pretty burnt out in terms of how of running the startup. I saw a great prospects for iMeshup, but I was so burnt out with rising the software agency. Also partly because my I think that was when my third child was born. So I have 3 kids, and the last one was the third one is a boy, and so the family, day to day, let's say, stuff was happening. I had my third kid, being born. I had Ryzen, which was, struggling in terms of cash flow, and I had iMesh Up, which is kind of like your fourth child, right? So you always see your startup as your child. And it was extremely hard for me to fundraise and continue the journey, having all those family obligations, as well as having to deal with the end of the software agency that I so there were tons of lessons from that period. But I still believe the idea is great. I think the 3D collaboration has been growing since then. Now I see like 5 or 6 companies doing the same exact thing. Some of them just coincidentally they have the exact same user interface as we did during iMeasure. Yeah, so that's the whole story.
Yeah, I mean, this is like another saying that goes about entrepreneurs. Like they say, the best entrepreneurs are those that have strong convictions, but they hold them lightly, right? Because you have to be also pragmatic about your personal life situation and be realistic about how the business is growing and whether it's worth putting more time into, or is it to exit is the best solution for the business and yourself. So that's a big decision. I think a lot of founders don't get to that opportunity to be in that space to start with, as well to have the opportunity to sell. So maybe before we move on into like fungies and getting into it, I think a topic that always interests me is how other entrepreneurs like myself are dealing with the stress and situations like that. So how did you go about closing it, walking away? How did that go? What was the thought process, and how did you feel after time has passed?
So it was a very hard decision because we also had investors in iMeasure. So I concluded to them, I have these personal challenges at the time with the family. I have these challenges with the second or first company, which is Ryzen. It was very hard for me to continue. I'm hopeful that we can get back to iMeasure and grow the company, but it wasn't the best time. So at that time, I definitely ended Ryzen and sold the company and finished that. But with iMeasure, my thinking was that I'm going to give myself a break for a while. I have my product finished. The code base is there, and hopefully that I can get back to my entrepreneurial path once my kids, let's say, at least that my son, which was born back then, was grown enough so that I could have time to dedicate to that company. And so I joined, and also I was financially, I had to provide for the family, so I was, let's say, in a financial burden. Having exited the company allowed us to buy our apartment. But it was a burden in terms of how to continuously provide for the family with 3 kids. You have kids yourself. You know how it feels when you have this gut-wrenching feeling that, hey, it's time maybe to do something serious. Like the way that your family or your wife always sees like you doing startup is like, hey, it's a fun toy, it's not a real business. It's a fun toy that you're having, right? And so let's get back to real job and get a real job and make money and provide for the family and just forget about this entrepreneurial thing. Yeah, dreams. And so I had to stop iMeasure for a while, not saying goodbye, but I had to clear my head and let's say get back to, let's say, a corporate job and see how it goes. And so I got my job at the PwC for a while, and there it turned out that I had other, let's say, passions, mainly with blockchain and crypto, and so with iMeasure, the company is the code base is still there, and I wish I had time to sell to someone else, but I haven't resolved that yet.
Amazing. Like, it's really amazing that you are sharing this, because I feel the same pressures sometimes as well. And I did the same thing early in my journey. I started my first startup in Dubai, and then that startup didn't go well financially over the long run. It was still generating revenues, but again, financial strains, lots of learning, same issue. And you have investors on the board, and you have to take that hard decision of shutting it down and then having to take the serious route. Everyone was like, wake up, take a corporate job. And I did that. And I did that for the next 7 years of my life, 8 years of my life. I worked corporate. I worked at Ericsson. I worked at Sandvik. And while I was working corporate, I always had like my side like hustles, ideas in entrepreneurship, because I'm always trying to like validate the next big idea that I want to work on. And I feel like it's not a choice for a lot of people. If you have that entrepreneurial spirit that's in you, you're not going to settle for a corporate job. You're always going to be thinking about it unless you do it and go out and try it.
Yeah, it's in you forever. Like once you try being an entrepreneur and set up your own business, it will be very hard to work for someone else and under someone else's leadership. Um, the idea is that going out there and having to let's say be confined within the constraints of the bigger entity is so it's so it restrains let's say my abilities. That's how I always thought about that, is that there's always this ceiling that you can get just as much as the company allows you to be or allow you to grow into. Whereas when you have your own company, even if it's small, you can have you can make your own decisions, your own path, and that's just it will stay in you forever. And so I think it's super hard for people that once they got the taste of entrepreneurship, it's never going to be easy to come back to, let's say, a normal, let's say, corporate job.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And even when you go to a corporate job, you'll become a pain in the ass for everyone else in your corporate office because
I was a pain in the ass.
Yeah, me too.
I was constantly asking for so let's do this innovation. I have this idea. I was coming to the managers and my friends like, hey, let's fix this and let's make this better, and I have this idea, and let's make that and that product and that product. And so they were so tired of me constantly going to them, like asking for resources, asking for money and for people, and pursuing all these stuff that were not in the core of that department or the business.
Because it's in your nature to create. I did the same thing in every corporate job that I held. I'm like, let us create, because I think that entrepreneur. So I start believing in this idea. You can be an entrepreneur where you're inside a larger organization, but you get to influence, direction in terms of product, positioning, go to market, whatever it is. Like you're gonna like innovate in the area you're specializing in. And I think smart companies today more likely are, starting to be more aware of that, and they're starting to cultivate talents like that. But I still feel like your best playground is your own playground, the sandbox that you create with your tools, right? And with your vision. Cool. Speaking of the vision, let's go to Fungies. So what is Fungies? What's happening there?
Yeah, so Fungies helps game developers to build their own storefronts and marketplaces that are embeddable in-game. We are Web3 compatible, meaning that if you have a Web3 NFT game, you can set up the marketplace for that game in minutes rather than spending months and hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's what Fungies is. So there are two ways that we are thinking about the whole gaming industry. One is we see a lot of potential in Web3 gaming, NFT gaming, where you can actually own the assets of the game itself. And second is to allow more in-game or game economies liquidity when you actually have people trading your in-game items. They don't have to be the players. They don't have to engage in the game itself. They can be speculators or traders of those NFT assets. So that provides a lot of liquidity when you are a gamer. Say you've just played a Diablo, and then that legendary sword was just dropped by a boss, and now you can instantly sell that on the market just because there's so much liquidity, so many traders outside of the game itself. So that's our one. The first thesis that we have is that this thing will take off probably in 5 or 10 years. It's going to be a long time because there's going to be a pushback from the industry. There's going to be pushback from the players. There's going to be pushback from the game studios themselves. But ultimately, I think that every game in the future will have some elements of decentralized asset ownership. So that's our first thesis, and we are one of the first in the field to cater to this growing industry. The second thesis is that there will be more and more people playing independent from games from independent studios. If you look at the data from year to year, the number of people playing AAA games, mobile games, are actually declining, and the only category that is growing right now is indie games, which is seeing 25% year-on-year growth. If you look at the charts, the number of games being pushed out there as indie games has been growing, and it's going to be around 350,000 to 400,000 indie games per year being published. So there's a huge market there, and our second thesis is that this market will grow as people will seek more independent games.
Okay, so independent game growth is definitely going to be interlinked with the utilization of Web3 applications to create incentives and whatever. We hear a lot about play and earn now as a model that is becoming more and more the next freemium model of gaming. It's becoming the trend. But let's talk about why would they need Web3 decentralizations versus like Web2 like assets. You're playing League of Legends and you can like unlock these weapons or whatever, right? What is the difference here, and why where is the demand coming from? Is it truly from the consumers? They're expecting true digital ownership?
So I've been playing the last 20 years, and a lot of those games that I've played, including Diablo, which had its own auction house, World of Warcraft had its own auction house, RuneScape, the game's economy was great there, people trading with each other also on the auction house. Ragnarok Online, CS:GO. If you look at the CS:GO skin market, where I think recently the 400 a weapon skin was sold with a $400,000 price tag. Dota 2 skins. So game economies and peer-to-peer trading has been forever in the gaming space. It was just and it has its flaws. The first flaw is interoperability. It's a very hard word, by the way, interoperability.
I hate that word as well.
Yeah, but that's the first flaw of having your game being distributed and developed by one studio, which means that the sword or the item that was dropped for you in Diablo 2, it won't be passed on to Diablo 3 or 4, which is gonna come in June this year, and that means that all the efforts, all the hours, thousands of hours that you have put into grinding that legendary sword or amulet will go to vain, because you can't transfer the item onto the next game, or in the same, let's say, game universe. So that's the first, let's say, flaw of, let's say, centralized game development. Second is the ownership. Once those servers go offline, once those games they will not be served, or having no live ops later on, your items are lost, and the item itself is just like a number or a row in the game's database in the backend, right? And once it's taken down, you will never have access to that certain item again. And so the asset ownership is the second flaw that is in centralized game development, meaning that you won't have access to the asset once the game shuts down. And the third thing is liquidity. In Diablo or World of Warcraft, when you play those games, the only people that you can trade with are the players from those games, right? You can't trade with people that outside of the game. It has no value in the real world outside of that game, or let's say community of gamers, and that's the third flaw. The games economy, liquidity. When you have an NFT or Web3 game, you can have outsiders who can trade your items. So that means that you find anything in game, you can sell it to people even outside of the game itself. So those are the three major flaws that I think that the Web3 gaming, NFT, and decentralized gaming could solve. I'm not saying that it will solve. Maybe there's some other ways I'm not sure about, but those are the flaws that exist, and maybe blockchain is the answer for that. I don't know.
So it's fantastic answer, and thank you for getting into details with this three-pronged response. But I'd like to play a little devil's advocate, so let's explore them a bit more in detail. So the first one is the idea of interoperability. I hope I got it right, because I always mess it up as well. See, we're both non-native English speakers, so we could be excused for that. We're doing, I think, pretty good. So let's say Diablo has 3 different generations of the game, and you work really hard in part 1 of the games, and you unlock every legendary weapon and item and skin you can get. And now you go to Diablo 2, you start from scratch, right? So there's an argument to that okay, one of it is maybe it's not a bug, it's by design, because you want to, it's part of the pleasure is to work hard to unlock certain items, right? So you kind of go through that journey again. Otherwise, it'll be boring if you have all of your, master weapons right from the onset of the game. The other argument is, wouldn't they be able, as a game developer, to make sure that this interoperability is functioning on a centralized database? I mean, we hear that argument a lot for people that are, non-Web3 believers. I think they're reducing the complexity of it, to be fair. But I'll leave the answer to you. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there will be some moment when the community will push back in terms of there's example World of Warcraft, like there's like 12 or like 15 expansions. I don't keep the track record anymore, but there's been like 14, 15 expansions. And people are tired with all the grinding, like, hey, it's going to be raiding again, and I'm going to have that item again. And I think, and that's my hypothesis, is that there's going to be a pushback from the community of players. And we already see that in CSGO. CSGO 2 is going to come out. And so the questions from the people is that, are those skins that I've bought for hundreds of thousands of dollars, will they be transferable to CSGO 2? And there's a huge debate now. And I think that Valve is backing out on this discussion, and they're going to allow transferring skins from CSGO 1 to CSGO 2. And so if the players are already pushing for interoperability in Web2 games, and using let's say legacy methods such as centralized database, there will come a point where blockchain will come into the space and solve that. So there's no solution. Obviously, the players, they don't care about how you solve their problems, and that's something for the game studios to do. They only care about their problem. Is that when it spends so much money buying all those CS:GO skins, you have to make sure that those skins will be also usable and tradable in CS:GO 2, and so that's a perfect example of where decentralized asset ownership and interoperability could play out, and it's already happening. And you just look at the discussions on Reddit and Discord channels. People were so angry about about transferring the skins from CS:GO to CS:GO 2. I can't remember the second question though.
No, I think that's a perfect answer, to be honest. You have covered all the necessary things that I was looking for. One of the things that you mentioned is that users are demanding it, right? So I'm not a gamer. I'm not in the gaming industry. I mean, I used to be a gamer. Like you, I played Doom and all these games when I was younger, but I had a cutoff date. I think around the time I got married, that's when I stopped gaming. That's the correlation. My last game was Fallout, by the way, that I played. I think it was Fallout 3 or something. But anyways, so I do get that the gaming industry and the gaming audience might be demanding for this interoperability, the ability to retain them, and that's putting pressure. What I really liked about your answer as well, that you're not really thinking about it. Does it really matter to be Web3 or centralized? You're just looking at it from a technological perspective. What is the best technology to achieve the purpose, regardless whether it's Web3 or Web2? And we understand private servers and their integrations are a lot more complex than you just issuing a transparent on a transparent ledger the ownership of items, and just remove yourself as the middle party that is holding the fort, and give all these other benefits you're talking about. Being able to sell it to third parties outside of the game, and monetize these opportunities both for the players and the gamers. But I do see a point here of conflict, right? Like while the customers and the users might demand more ownership of their digital assets, true digital ownership of it, the gaming companies, on the other hand, have something to lose by giving that digital ownership fully to other people, right? They lose control maybe of their brand. They could lose control of the value of certain items that have been dropped. They can monetize it in a better way, or the supply even of certain products. Because if you issue smart contracts, you're going to limit yourself in so many ways, how many items there is, etc. So what is your take on gaming companies, like the larger ones, adoptions of Web3? Do you see them to be risk averse? Are they avoiding that transition, or are they actually receptive and see the value?
I think that there are two camps right now. One camp is hardcore Web3 believers, and that is Netmarble, for example, one of the largest South Korean gaming companies, and Square Enix from Japan, the maker of Final Fantasy series. They're hardcore Web3 believers. We're seeing Ubisoft, we're seeing Epic Games allowing Web3 games into the Epic Store. So that's one camp. The other camp is like hardcore, Web2 and mainstream. They like to keep the status quo, which is Valve, the maker of Steam, and CS:GO and Dota 2, by the way. And of course Blizzard, which is Activision Blizzard, large company. They didn't ever mention about Web3, and I think those are the two camps that will have their own rights. So from my perspective, when you have a game that is hugely successful, such as CS:GO and Dota 2, you will try to keep your wallet garden in place. So you don't want to have like external players or protocols or technologies to uh, inherently modify your game in any way, because that's their cash cows. Like CS:GO and Dota 2 has been Valve's cash cow since many years. But I think that it's very short-term thinking. As I mentioned, CS:GO already has saw the pushback from the community. One thing that Valve and other large gaming studios such as Blizzard, Activision could look into is how to actually extract value from the peer-to-peer trading from the players. I mean, that's inevitable when you have the in-game economy and games economy, and people spend their time and real hard-earned money into those games. At some point, you will have to allow them, and then you have to think about ways to extract that value. So I think that a lot of Web3 games, they already have figured it out. Axie Infinity and Alien Worlds, Splinterlands, and even OpenSea as an example, is that they take a transaction fee from every trade from peer-to-peer transactions, and that's how you could actually benefit once you go decentralized. And so I think it will take some time for those companies to realize and how you could increase the players' engagement and repeat purchases and increase the validity of the in-game economy by allowing decentralized peer-to-peer trading. And they will realize that, and one of the ways that they could benefit from it is the transaction fees from every sale from peer-to-peer trading. They could act as a middleman and market maker, essentially for the peer-to-peer trading. And so well, speaking from an optimist of Web3 gaming, there will become a point where, as I mentioned before, every game will have some aspect of like decentralized Web3 gaming or true asset ownership, and and we just need a really one breakout success, not the kind of like Axie Infinity with unsustainable economy of play to earn and actually only extracting value from the game itself, from the scholars, uh, but something much bigger, and I think that the $10 billion that have been put by the Web3 VCs into Web3 gaming, I hope it will produce at least one mega hit, which will allow others to jump wagon and join this Web3 gaming industry.
I think one of the things that you've touched upon a few times just in your explanation right now is I picked up on a keyword that I really like: sustainable ecosystems, right? And when you talk about sustainable ecosystem, you're adding value to the users and you're adding value to the creators, and everyone basically benefits by creating an ecosystem, something that is so interdependent on each other's success and value sharing, right? And I think that is really the mind shift that a lot of gaming companies are taking into consideration. And now that you mentioned that $10 billion are going to be invested in that field, it's kind of inevitable that you're going to get across a game that will come out of this investment that will achieve that, right? So let's talk about the ecosystem. What are the variables you're dealing here with in creating a game with the right ecosystem? What are the variables that people need to consider? Fun is very important. It's not only about earning. Balancing fun and earning is very important. Then creating something that is self-sustainable, that continuously grows because there's utility for whatever tokens are being issued in the game. So take us through, in your mind, what would be the ideal game that will make that breakout?
Well, I think Blizzard games and Diablo 2 and Path of Exile, no, Path of Exile is not Blizzard's game, of course, but a lot of MMORPGs out there uh, are done right. And one of the reasons why their economies are so thriving is because they provide the end game content, and the depth and the amount of content that is intended for the hardcore players is in place. So one of the key elements I think is that will allow a game's success with a decentralized economy is actually have enough funding for you to sustain the game in years or decade or even longer. Take an example of EVE Online, right? The game has been out there for probably like 20 years, and it's a space game where you manage your colonies and you make alliances and you wage wars with other clans or guilds and economies. The game has been out there for 20 years, and the reason it's so successful is because the amount of content that was produced through 20 years, the amount of work and hard work into looking at balancing the game's economy was put there. What I'm trying to say is, in order for Web3 games with deep player economies to succeed, they just need a lot of funding. Not the kind of funding of like, I don't know, $10 million or $20 million. That for a live ops games is not even enough. That's probably 1/3 of the budget, or 1/4 even of the budget of AAA games with deep economies, such as Cyberpunk, or Diablo, or like World of Warcraft. And so the breakout success with a great games economy unfortunately won't come from the Web3 gaming startups and small companies. It will have to come from those like Activision, EA Games, or Blizzard, or Square Enix. And so I think that to really have a successful breakout, you just need deep funding, because making games with engaging economies is just hard and money consuming.
Yeah, but it's very important that you mentioned that, because I think indie gaming companies that are experimenting in Web3 are pretty much kind of like the equivalent of a pilot to a TV series, right? They are creating the first kind of like test of how this can be, the model, the architecture. And if a big company like Blizzard, Activision Blizzard, or Ubisoft or whatever sees a value in it, then they're like, okay, let's scale this pilot project into a full-fledged Netflix series or whatever. Put the budget behind it.
Yeah, and it won't happen fast. I mean, they have the development cycles of like 5 or 10 years. And so if we are gonna see Web3 gaming to succeed, it's probably gonna take another 10 years.
Wow, that is a big statement. And how do you think do you think investors today have the similar expectations, or is it not matching what you see as the reality of the industry?
I think that don't those guys from H16Z Games or Play Ventures or Beatcraft, they're smart guys, and they're probably much smarter than me, and they see the industry playing out in the next 10 years how it's going to be, and they've been heavily invested in Web3 gaming. And so I think that we are in sync with one of the smartest people in the industry, is that it will get there. The question is how fast. And I think that from the entrepreneur's point of view, when you see a lot of those Web3 gaming projects sprouting out, Elixir Gaming, they just got some funding from Square Enix, building the Steam for Web3 games. You're seeing Web3 games out there pushing their games. A lot of people just, I think, underestimate how much it's going to take and how much time it's going to take for the industry to let's say grow in size, and that could take 10 years.
Okay. So this is incredible. I had no idea that it's that long cycle. I see, a great focus on Web3 games from investors, and I see a lot of startups in the Web3 games, to be honest, like are popping up left and right. So I assumed, because typically we understand as entrepreneurs, there's three types of investors, right? You have VCs. VCs usually invest for the next 5 years. They don't have these long-term 10 years goals. Usually big corporates invest for the next 10 years, right? So for me to understand that the gaming industry is actually has much longer, lifetime cycle to product to be out in the market the way it should be, makes sense. I mean, it's complex building. It's not so simple.
Well, let's say that let's imagine EA Games, right? A huge company with thousands of employees. They just got to know Web3 now, and their view is, we've been both working in the corporate world, right? I mean, it's from, let's say, from the VPs to execs in those companies, they're gonna look at Web3 gaming is like, hey, there's a new toy, there's a new thing going on right there. It's kind of small. It's just beginning to play out, and we don't have like any certain model or business model even how to make money from that yet. And let's see 1 or 2 years how it's gonna be playing out. We're a big corporate. We still have our cash flow cows of FIFA. By the way, FIFA was taken back, but no, we have pretty decent, let's say, cash inflow in the next years from our existing Web2 mainstream games, and so maybe there's going to be a huge success from one of those investments in 1 or 2 years. Then we're going to have a more serious look, and then our game is going to be okay. So let's say that there's going to be a discussion and the decision to launch a Web3 game in 2 to 3 years. That's another 2-3 years of development. So that's going to take 6 to 7 years to develop a game, and to make sure that it's a huge success. We're going to have a long cycle of catering new content to those gamers from 2 to 3 years. And so that's 10 years already, right? And so you know how those corporations they work, they think in terms of, you know, a year or two of planning. They probably already planning the year ahead, and so for the industry to really fly, I think 10 years is optimal time frame.
Great to hear. Now, follow-up question on that, because I heard similar things are being said about the metaverse, and I would like to get your opinion on that. You know, Mark Zuckerberg, great vision was for the metaverse. Was he too early? Is he a madman? And what is your view on the evolution of the metaverse?
Metaverse is tricky because all the success is coming from Roblox or Fortnite, which are the metaverses that actually exist right now. The the player engagement and the community engagement is mainly from kids. I mean, who else is playing all those long hours rather than 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years old kids in Minecraft, in Roblox, in Fortnite, and those are kids, right? And so I think the metaverses are there, but um, they're not from the fashion industry or from any other industry other than gaming. And the metaverse is, you can't push and force the metaverse to people's minds. And that was, I think, what Facebook was doing, is, let's say, forcing those people to be in the metaverse. And I think that unfortunately all the metaverses out there in the Web3 space, decentralized, the sandbox, there's a reason why we've seen all the smoke coming from the news outlets that claiming that there's just like 2,000-3,000 players at a daily basis playing those games. And I think the reason for that is the friction. Web3 gaming, having your wallet, NFT trading, it all allows, of course, decentralized asset ownership. But the people that are capable of doing those things are mainly adults, right? And so that is not the market for existing metaverses. The existing metaverses are for kids, especially my son and my daughter. They've been playing Minecraft and Roblox, and I've seen the in-game economy. It's hugely engaging for the kids, but the metaverses will, I think, exist just in games and mainly for kids for now. As adults, we don't have much the luxury to spend as much time in the metaverses.
To be honest with you, this makes a lot of sense thinking about it now, because if you take a look at like Fortnite or Roblox or any of these like popular metaverses, and I see a lot of brands doing activations there, but if you look at the audience, over 60% are between the ages of 10 and 18. So you're talking about literally kids who are playing these games. So it's great for product placement, I think, by a brand. I think that's great if you want to do a product placement for, apparels or whatever. But I think, realistically thinking about Web3 applications with the level of friction that exists today. So I guess, what is Fungi doing to reduce the level of friction? That's the leading question.
Yeah, I would like to come back to Fungi's, but just one last thing for the metaverses. I think it all perfectly makes sense for the brands like Adidas and Nike and Hasbro and the toy makers to be in metaverses such as Fortnite, Roblox, and Minecraft, because those kids, they will eventually go out onto the job market. They will grow out there and be the decision makers of their own in 5 to 6 years. And that's how I think the brands are going to think, is that once you are in the metaverse, you stick to those kids' heads, all the brands that are popular in the real world. And then in 5, 6 years, they will know the brand and get really familiar with the brands already that came out of those metaverses. So it makes sense for the brands to be in metaverses, just because there's so many people, so many kids playing those games, and to be really early in their journey of shopping in the future. Whereas in the Web3 space, it doesn't make sense, because one, you don't have the number of players, and two is that those are already adults. The decision to buy stuff is already has been made years and years ahead. Yeah, so that's my take about.
I'm not gonna think Gucci is any cooler if I see them on the sandbox personally, you know. So I get it as an adult, like I really don't care. But it's really fascinating because if you think about it, brands that are jumping into the gaming space today and having these product placements in are genius because you're there to have fun as a kid. You're getting to that game. So when you see a brand associated with fun, you're just associating it with memories. You built that nostalgia over time and you built that purchase preference. It's a little bit evil.
And it all makes sense because that's where the eyeballs and time spent, and I think that was always the brands and advertising department's job to see where people and kids now spend time nowadays. It so happened, and it's very sad, by the way. I don't want my kids to spend a lot of time in metaverses and in the gaming industry, so I understand that and trying to limit that. But when you look at those departments, they always analyze like how people spend time, and it just so happens that after the post-pandemic or like during the pandemic, the number of people playing games and the Gen Z playing games, and it's very sad. There's a statistic like how often do meet with your friends. It's declining just because those metaverses, engagement time in those metaverses are increasing, and so when your time is spent there and your eyeballs are seeing in pixels in the games, then of course the brands they're gonna jump into that just because to exist in their consumption mind.
But can I be honest on that note? Since COVID happened and we all got used to live in isolation, we all got to live distance from our families and friends and everything. I've kind of grown accustomed to the idea of the metaverse myself, right? But for me, what I define as the metaverse is not only me being on Roblox, which I'm never at, or any kind of like video game. But for me, it's like the metaverse could be my Discord group or my Telegram group. I'm messaging someone, my friends. We jump on a conference call. We jump on a Discord call, and we just have a virtual experience where we kind of engage with each other. And I think, going even a post-COVID world as well, I think this trend is going to last. I'm thinking myself actually moving to the countryside where I can be more in nature, but I can also connect with people remotely and work remotely. So I don't know how you see that also impacting adults, because where's our attention today other than these like little tribal groups that we have on our phones?
Well, we are in the metaverse in Fungi's company. We use Gather, a virtual office, so it's a 2D game. It's like a pixelated game where we have a virtual office, and then each of us has his own desk, and we actually come up to each other in that metaverse to talk to each other, and so we already using, let's say, the metaverse in our working environments, being a 100% remote company. We are a 100% remote company, and we have our virtual offices and all the spontaneous talks between coffees. Instead of like standing next to the coffee machine and the fridge and in the kitchen, we actually have the virtual kitchen where we just come out there for meetings, and so it's already happening. Like working in the metaverse is already happening, and so I think that the trend is gonna go. I saw the report today morning that the post-pandemic in San Francisco, the cell phone activity has dropped to 37% pre-pandemic. So the activity in the downtown San Francisco is down. It's just now 30% of what it used to be, and that's huge, and that's impacting the food businesses, the retail businesses, and San Francisco downtown is actually a ghost town right now, and so it will have a lot of implications for the real world real estate as well. Having also many empty office spaces. It's already already happening, and I think the metaverses for the adults will be very different from the metaverses for the kids. And the metaverses for the adults will be, virtual office spaces, virtual meetings, virtual, everything, signing the documents. I don't even send the physical documents anymore to my investors or my employees. Everything is happening through PandaDoc or DocuSign, so it's already happening. And yes, the metaverse for the adults is already happening and will be there, but I think that it will be very fragmented. I mean, it's not gonna be like huge super app, you know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe the Chinese will have their let's say WeChat, and maybe they're gonna have like this huge super metaverse where everyone will be, going to work there, eating at the restaurant, and making calls in the one super mega metaverse. But at least for what I'm observing now is the kids, they have very centralized and one point of like groups of games. The adults, I'm using all the tools out there to make my work efficient in remote environments.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, same here. But it's really interesting because I'm trying to think from your perspective, because that's why I brought up the Mark Zuckerberg question to start with, and the metaverse vision, because we often forget, and we're now live in an age where we expect change to happen so fast and so instantaneous. So I'm like, give it 10 years. Maybe it's too early to see the impact of the metaverse truly on individuals' lives. And we've mentioned it's already impacting us in so many ways, but as you said, it's more of a fragmented metaverse. You have your ChatGPT becoming your personal virtual assistant, and then you have your DocuSign, your virtual notary for all your signatures, and so on and so forth, right? And I don't know if it's going to be one convergence of one company owning everything, or it's just going to be this fragmented world, but we're definitely heading there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is that most probably it could happen in China, where everything is so centralized, and one government is having a substantial impact, and also benefits of having everything in one place just to control it better for the purpose of their government. But
well, it could be Elon Musk as well, right? Like he talked about creating the WeChat, the American WeChat.
Yeah. The super app of Twitter X.com, which is becoming the super app. I think that in one sense, App Store is one of those, let's say, metaverses. I guess in some extent, where it is a super app where they still control the payment systems. For example, when you are in the App Store, the only way that you can use a payment system is using the App Store Apple Pay, and they get 30% cut from that. And actually, the App Store and services from the App Store are contributing the most in terms of revenue for Apple. And so, in a sense, App Store is a super app. But we luckily, you can still have your choices in terms of choosing your phone. So Android is still there.
All right, so then let's discuss Fungies. Then what is Fungies doing to reduce this friction and make it easier for gaming studios to use Web3 technology?
So when you are building your Web3 game, one of the core products you're going to build out is your NFT marketplace, be it in-game or the web version of the marketplace. That could probably take you months of work and hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on building that marketplace from scratch. We come in and we reduce that time to a few minutes. So if you want your own NFT marketplace with customized branding and allow your players to trade between themselves, that's where you would come to Fungies to reduce the time for your go-to-market for your marketplace for the game. So that's one thing that we are doing extremely well, is to allow anyone, any Web3 game to have their own marketplace in a few minutes. The second thing, and this is for the indie game developers, we allow them to set up their own storefront web store also in minutes, but solving another problem. And that problem is about having to distribute on Steam on other platforms that have 30% cut. I think that's a ripoff, and so what our tools will allow them to do is to set up their own distribution channels, their own web storefront where they can sell their games and take control of how their branding experience is going to look like, and how much they can charge the customers. We only take 3% transaction fee for every sale from the storefront, so that would leave another 27% in savings for those game studios out there. And everything is no code, so there's no coding required. You just go out there, customize, change the logo, customize your brand, and the payment integration is already in place with Stripe as our partner. So that's how we can reduce the friction of having to develop your own storefront and marketplace presence.
Amazing. And do you guys also take care of the custodial wallets to reduce the friction, or people still have to use MetaMask and Coinbase and third-party wallets?
Yeah. So our strategy is not to focus on areas where we cannot compete. I mean, there's probably dozens of wallet solutions out there, including from Stardust, including from Fireblocks, Magic Link, and other wallet providers, of course, going to consensus with their MetaMask. And so we are not in the wallet business, and I think that's they're doing extremely well done jobs, providing the wallet solutions. Our job is to provide as many customization options and the freedom of choice for the game developers. And that's where we want to go. Our strategy is to really allow the game studios, be it Web 2 or Web 3, to have thousands of options how they can customize their branding experience through their own web storefront, which will also be embedded in game. And so that's where we're going. We don't want to take the wallet play or the infrastructure play, or like, let's say, the Web 2 to Web 3 transitioning. That's not our the problem that we're solving. We're solving the problem of how to build a beautiful front end for your marketplace or your web store.
Sure. So other than the front end, then when it comes to, like, let's say your smart contracts, connecting them to the game, what is your role there?
Yeah, so if you already have, let's say you are a Web3 game, you already have a smart contract which produces NFTs from the game's backend. So every item that's going to appear in the game will be minted as NFT on the blockchain. We can allow you to import all those NFTs or the smart contract, the NFTs from the smart contract in an automated way. So each time there's a new NFT minted from your game, our backend will take that NFT to the platform and show them as purchasable NFTs on your own marketplace. And so it all works in the background, so there's no API needed. The import feature is already live. You can check it out, and importing NFTs is just about pasting the smart contract address, and that will keep importing new NFTs that are gonna appear in your game. So that's one thing. The second thing is, if you don't have the API or your own smart contract, we can provide that. And we're working on the API solution so that you can take your existing Web 2 game into Web 3 by providing our own smart contract that you can just plug into through the API. And that is our strategy, by the way. There's a very limited amount of Web 3 games right now, probably 2,000, and maybe 200 of them are playable. Whereas in Web 2 games, you have hundreds of thousands of games being pushed out there every year. So that's a huge market right there. And the companies that will have an existing portfolio of Web 2 games, they will win out on Web 3 gaming as well, because all those games out there, they are not ready to implement Web 3. But companies that have existing Web 2 portfolios, they will be able to upsell the Web 3 gaming technology to their current portfolio. And that's our strategy, to first onboard as many Web 2 games as possible, And maybe somewhere in the future, when they will have a need to go to Web3, we can provide the SDKs, the APIs for them to transition from their games from Web2 to Web3.
And so when we're talking about games here, we're not talking about mobile games, right? Mobile games have to go through the ecosystem of the Play Store and the Apple Store. So this is primarily focused on independent games that are desktop primarily.
Yeah, for now, yes. But if you look at Theta and Arena, made in Vietnam, by the way, they released the game in App Store and Play Store without any NFT or blockchain experience. So if you download the app, you won't have any, let's say, touch point with the blockchain itself. But they have the marketplace in the web version. So what happens is that when you play the game, the backend data will still feed the blockchain, part of that game, and you can trade items, NFTs, outside of the game. The game still exists, and it's non-blockchain games, but the backend is actually blockchain.
On the blockchain.
And that's how you go through the approval process for App Store and Android Store to make a game that is completely invisible in terms of blockchain game.
So here's a question. Does Apple allow that? Is Apple, because I remember them being very stringent about any form of monetary payments on their system.
Yeah. So there are two things here. One is since 2019 or 20, I can't remember, they have actually crossed out one of the sentences in their terms of use, which was very important, is that you cannot transfer your players' data or your emails or your users' data to third-party platforms and sell through your own platform. It was actually scratched out, and so what it means is that you can actually use App Store as a means of as an acquisition channel for your users or your players. And then you can transfer them to your own database or have direct communication with them outside the App Store. And it already happened. Second thing that just happened yesterday was Apple claiming to have won the lawsuit from Epic Games. So there was this battle between Tim Cook and Sweeney guys, the CEO of Epic Games, that Apple has pushed out Epic Games when they allowed their own payment system inside App Store.
Yes.
Apple claimed that they won, but in one case, Epic Games actually won, and the judge has ruled in favor of Epic Games, is that Apple will have to allow external links inside App Store for other payment methods. And that's actually the most important part of the whole lawsuit. And it just happened like yesterday or today. It means that you can actually have third-party payments inside App Store now. I mean, not now, but probably in a couple of months when the Apple will have to enforce that.
Wow, that is like groundbreaking for Apple.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge for the entire industry. Yeah.
Wow. I remember all the restrictions I used to deploy for clients that I had apps on the Apple Store. And I remember the whole compliance issues when it comes to payments. They have to take their cut out of everything. You cannot have any external links. And even if you have like a shadow backend system, right, that was not allowed even back then.
So it's huge. It's seismic shift for Apple. And it hurts. I mean, the majority of revenue comes from the App Store and all those services. So it's a major hit for Apple, but that's a major, success for the rest of the industry. It means that we can also, allow our payment system and our, web store to be implemented inside App Store games as well. So it's huge.
Well, good to hear about what Fungi is doing and how you are really reducing the barrier for our game developers in general, not only web games, but just game developers to utilize Web3 technology to augment their, offerings and create this ecosystem of value between the users and the game developers. So what would you advise a startup building games today? They want to create something unique. They want to utilize Web3. What is your advice?
one thing is to experiment, and to really be not ashamed of copying successful business models or game economies from other Web3 games. I speak about Axie Infinity and Alien Worlds and what was the game from this Horizon guys, Skyweaver, Gods Unchained, to experiment and to copy if something succeeds. Two is don't rely too much on the buzzwords for the Web3 NFT gaming community. The players they don't care about Web3, they don't care about NFTs, they don't care about the technology of the wallets. Make it seamless for them to be onboarded. Make the experience as Web2 native, or let's say seamless as possible. And so no wallet creation. Anything about NFT will be get people to get allergy from that. And so yeah, that's my second advice, is that to actually offer the great gameplay and the technology behind that, just somehow smartly serve underneath. And three is funding. I mean, fundraise as much as possible, because I'm seeing in a lot of Web3 gaming companies having raised in 2021, 2022, they are now struggling to fundraise, and a lot of them unfortunately will die out. And so I know, just fundraise, because taking your game to Web3 is going to take a lot of time, because besides of providing a fun gameplay, you have to have also the Web3 blockchain element to that, and that's double the workload.
Thank you so much, Duke, for your time today. Really, we've talked a lot, and I couldn't even there's so much to talk about. I could not even conclude this conversation saying we have concluded it, because we can go on forever. But it was a pleasure. Thank you for your insights. Your background into the gaming industry has been very insightful for me, and I'm sure it's been insightful for a lot of people in the audience. I will leave your contact details as well for anyone who wants to reach out to Duke. You can reach out below, and you'll also have contacts about fungies. So if you're interested to build your game, reach out. They will hook you up. The product is ready, right?
It's ready, and you can register your account at fungies.app. Sanat, it was a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me for this podcast.